Jeff Greenfield, before we lose you all together to your World News Tonight assignment, we've been talking a little bit about this new generation. I was reminded that Mrs. Clinton said that the cruelest thing said about her during the campaign is when somebody in an article referred to her as middle-aged. What are the other symbols of new age you see? Have we lost Jeff Greenfield?
Seemingly so.
Okay. Jeff Greenfield, in fact, has already left his position. The president went by. Jeff said, that's it, I'm going home.
Well, you know, one of the new age, the most popular ball tonight,
MTV.
The MTV ball, even Nelson Mandela asked to be able to come to it, and if that's not...
All those guys behind the president are Secret Service agents whose job is very simple. If there's a bullet coming toward him, they step in front of it. I say simple.
Somebody said, Peter and David, that Hillary Clinton has become as interesting and exciting as Madonna and the Princess of Wales. We haven't had a First Lady probably since Jacqueline Kennedy, who has aroused such, well, not controversy now, but in a way she's become a creature of such interest, much more than most First Ladies.
You think those two women could be put into the same room?
I'm only talking about in terms of interest and the amount of conversation. There's hardly a newspaper that hasn't, a magazine that hasn't devoted pages and pages to Hillary Clinton.
There's probably no one in the country at this point who does not know the influence she has on him. And I was thinking of this, his mother again, and all of the other family members and friends and relatives who are going to be in the reviewing stand. President Clinton did say the other day that one of the things that would surprise us was not so much the remarks about Hillary, but if we heard the way his mother still really spoke to him.
She loves to bet, evidently, Peter. She loves the horse races. Very outspoken woman. To some degree, might remind one of the way we used to talk about Miss Lillian. You know, she's her own person.
Well, there's no doubt that the new First Lady is her own person. It's been made clear by the president. He said that she's going to be at his side intellectually, that she knows more about many of the subjects with which he must deal than others, and in many cases more than him. I can't think that I've ever seen a public relationship such as this, which has appeared to be beset by its emotional or personal troubles, yet which seems so secure in terms of intellectual compatibility.
Not only that, she is the first lady to have her office, I hear, in the West Wing, in the same wing as the president, not in the East Wing. So she, even though she won't be on the same floor, she will be very close to him. And he still hasn't said, Diane Sawyer in her interview last week asked if she was going to sit in on cabinet meetings, and she said it depends on what my husband says, and he still hasn't said, so she may well be.
Sitting in the catbird seat, said Jeff Greenfield, and behind him to come, floats and bands and miniature horses and donkeys and enough
lawn chairs,
twirlers from every one of the 50 states.
Presley,
the president and the rest of us
imitators
amused for.
There's an Elvis Presley float, if it's still going to be light enough for us to see it. You shake your head, David. You know how close President Clinton felt to Elvis Presley. He's a big fan.
Henry Graff, what do you think of all this? Our visitor from Columbia University.
Very exciting. As Barbara talked about the ages of these people, I was thinking that in the 18th century, the president who was inaugurated in 1793 was George Washington. That was his second inauguration. And he was 61 years old. In the 19th century, in 1893, Benjamin Harrison was inaugurated, and he was 60 years old. And here in 1993, we have a man who's 46 years old. We can say that history, at least with respect to the president's age, is on fast forward.
Well thought, Professor Graff.
People didn't live as long then as they do now.
That's true.
We have an 82-year-old Ronald Reagan, 80-year-old
Still pretty good.
Richard Nixon. He said what keeps him young is he doesn't look back. By the way, President Reagan was not invited, at least his office said, that he was not invited to this inauguration. President Ford's office said he was, but he just doesn't do this sort of thing.
Well, we certainly did see President Carter earlier today, and it was he who put very solidly at the center of the agenda the challenge of transition, because he said he couldn't remember a time except when Franklin Roosevelt inherited the presidency, or I guess gave up the presidency in the middle of World War II, and World War II, Harry Truman, such a dark and challenging period for a new president.
Sun is very low already. 3:30.
There are 125 different parade units. Is this going to run into the ball tonight? They'll be parading into that MTV ball?
It's going to run into the dark.
One gets the sense watching the president here, yes, as he goes over to Mrs. Clinton there, that all along the parade route here, as he has been walking, he's seen people who he knows in some fashion or another, who he's met along the way. You've probably seen on the news or read in the newspapers in the last couple of days that he brought 50 people to the inauguration with him who represented what he called faces of hope, people who all the way through the campaign had in some way inspired him, with whom he'd made a connection. At the interfaith service earlier this morning, which was one of the more splendid occasions that we've seen in a long time, with wonderful music and great preaching, it was said that President Clinton knew practically everybody there. Have you ever known a politician, David, to know so many people?
Well, Clinton, between here and the Capitol, I don't know how many people are out there, 500,000 or whatever it is. He seemed to know somebody every few feet, because he waved to them and made little familiar gestures, and so did she. And of course, a lot of people from Arkansas would be in those bleachers because they were able to get the tickets. But still, he seemed to know a tremendous number of people.
Well, he's back into the car now for the last short drive to the White House, we suspect. And then it won't be long before he and Mrs. Clinton and Chelsea, who I didn't see out of the car. Did I miss Chelsea?
She was in there.
She stayed in the car. Come to the inauguration reviewing stand to enjoy this parade. We'll be right
turn
back.
in and go in the White House back door.
You've seen it before today. This is one of the most moving views of America from the Lee Mansion at Arlington Cemetery, across the cemetery, across Memorial Bridge there in the left-hand corner, the Lincoln Memorial, which was the point at which President-elect and Mrs. Clinton ended their journey from Monticello the other day, and then down along the mall to the front north steps of the White House. The President and Mrs. Clinton on their way out to the reviewing stand, so this parade can finally get underway, and there is Chelsea. And as they go, Barbara Walters, tell us what the former First Lady, Mrs. Reagan, had to say.
All right, well, first of all, she said that to her knowledge, she and President Reagan had not been invited to the inauguration, but my feeling is that probably the president did receive it in his office, and maybe it just was not communicated to Mrs. Reagan, but Mrs. Reagan is not at all hurt about that, because they would not have planned to come. They're very comfortable where they are. Now then, Mrs. Reagan said that she did indeed show Mrs. Bush around, including the laundry room and so on, and that she would like it to be known that she certainly was very gracious and accommodating to Mrs. Bush. However, it is also true that she never was, the Reagans were never invited to a state dinner at the White House in the 4 years that the Bushes were there. So now you have both sides, and I think we can rest our case on that.
Let's leave that where it lies.
That's why don't we? In the reviewing stand will be
walking out to it then.
Will be the family, brothers of Hillary, brother of Bill Clinton, the entire cabinet, and then what's described as close friends will be sitting in the back of the reviewing stand.
And, of course, he has now been in the White House, or the President's house, as president for the first time.
And the Gores and their 4 children.
They had lunch on Capitol Hill, so they've come back to the president's house, and he's not going to get into the reviewing stand until they're good and ready for him. So, Chelsea, if you wouldn't mind just standing outside the door.
Just wait outside, honey. We'll get to you. Bulletproof glass we've been talking about.
The United States Army Field Band will play vocals and flourishes.
How life changes in such a short period of time. And the parade gets underway with the Army Band playing ruffles and flourishes. Goes rolling along.
By the United States Army Field Band as they pass the reviewing stand.
The band that was organized right at the end of World War II in 1946, stationed at Fort Meade in Maryland.
That hat is called a bearskin. I looked it up the other day.
It is?
And the smaller version of it is called a busby. Now, this is the most useless piece of information you will hear today.
Well, of course, it's another of these links between the United States and Great Britain. You see
It's
the
British,
bearskin
right? It's
worn
British.
by all the household guards
the
of the
British
cavalry.
one.
That's the United States Corps of Cadets, right in front of the president now, representing the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, representing the 4,000 men and women of the U.S. Military Academy, wearing their West Point gray uniforms, which date back to the early 1800s. This is why the Corps of Cadets is referred to as the long gray line.
By the way, outside of the military units, all of the people in the parade, they have come here at their own expenses. So many of them, with their own cities and towns, raise the money to send them here. Very proud of them all over the country.
Young people do that by selling donuts and washing cars and making a little money and kicking it into the kitty. And they pay their own way.
And there, just beneath you, in the blue uniform, the Old Guard, United States Infantry Old Guard.
All members of the military will be represented in the different units today, the 5 different units of the parade.
I'll tell you right now that we and the official announcer of the parade are going to confuse one another, and probably you as a result. Because I cannot tell you right off the top whether this is the United States Infantry Old Guard. It is not, because they're in blue, but I think it's the Arkansas Army National Guard. High School Super Band, the first civilians to pass the president. They played at his inaugurations in Little Rock, Arkansas. They played at his announcement rally